With the video that I plan on making today, I'm not even sure if I have a stance on this really. I just want to start a dialogue around one of the important questions that I've been meaning to ask about UFC and MMA in the year 2025. Is shaving your head before fighting in the UFC a patched method? Whenever I say patched method, we're going to talk about whether or not being bald as an MMA fighter, if that's a good base for MMA, because it seems like autism is in a far lead right now as far as what's the better base. By and large, bald fighters on the roster have been looking a lot more like Krillin than Agent 47 in the years 2024 through 2025, so let's take a closer look at exactly what I mean by this. Historically, the best fighters ever have been bald. George St. Pierre, he never had hair. All throughout his career, he retired and he was like, okay, let me grow out my hair now. I think he might have even went to Turkey and got a hair transplant, but he was as bald as they come. And this is somebody who's widely recognized as the best non-cheating fighter of all time. Anderson Silva, legendary striker. This was a bald man. The only hair that I've ever seen him grow on his head is gonna be a goatee. And for that reason, it just makes me assume that Anderson Silva fights in the octagon as bald as the day that he was born. Same thing with John Jones and Mighty Mouse as well. If you're a great fighter, there's a good chance that for a significant portion of your career, you either wore the bald head or you still rock it, and that was your thing. I just put a picture of Junior Dos Santos right there because I like Junior Dos Santos. He's not the greatest heavyweight ever, but great fighters, they have bald heads, is what I'm trying to drive home here. Lately, fighters who have signature bald or shaven heads haven't been receiving the same fight boost lately. In Ayman Zahabi's fight with Jose Aldo, it's understandable why he didn't get the fight boost because he was fighting another guy with another bald head, so it makes sense. Even though one trait that you're going to see throughout all these matchups where the bald fighter lost, it was always to a guy who had more hair than they did. All of these fighters who lost in these photos, they never lost to another bald guy. Keep this in mind. I'm just noticing. I'm just the noticer. Before, it was alleged that the curse was that on the UFC Embedded series, if you were getting a fade in one of the episodes, and that was damning you to lose your fight. Now it's just cutting any length of your hair at all. Jack Della Maddalena pieces up Bilal Muhammad. Ilia Topuria sleeps the hell out of Volkanovski after he comes off of another knockout from Islam Makhachev, where he was bald both times. Hey, Volk wasn't getting slept like that whenever he still had hair, man. He was putting the hurt on Jose Aldo back then, chasing him out of 145. This wasn't going down, none of this. Alex Pereira, our good man. This guy normally rocks the clean-shaven do. I feel like he had less hair in this fight against Magomed than he normally does, and he got beat up worse than he normally does. Who could forget Sean Strickland's 2 fights with DDP? He lost both of them, but in the second one, he got his nose busted, and he just went out bad in that. Sean Strickland is a guy who, just based off of the way that his follicles are arranged on his hair and that there's no gaps in them, this dude could totally grow out hair. He had hair at one point. And that wasn't protecting him from losing at that point, but being bald surely isn't something that's going to keep him safer from losses. Maybe Sean Strickland with hair, if he went back to Tarzan in 2025, he'd actually knock people out or have interesting fights. Conor McGregor learned his lessons. He went bald Mac for Dustin Poirier too, and then he got slept brutally, and he was like, alright, I'm never going bald again. And he never went bald again. And it's not like he fared much better in the third fight, but this was the beginning of the decline, bald Mac. And of course, who could forget about the chief bald cell moment in the UFC? This was the bald fighter who sold the hardest. If we want to talk about him being the bald fighter who sold the hardest because he got knocked out twice, these are by 2 of the promotion's greatest athletes. Leon Edwards chinned Usman in broad daylight. And we've never seen Kamaru Dean with a full set of hair, and he's bounced back from this, but maybe it's just for the fact that he's bald is the reason why he got chinned like this, nothing else. But we're not specifically here to talk about the legends of the sport who may have been bald in the UFC for years before they just now started losing, like Kamaru Usman. I feel like that's kind of cherry-picked. But one thing that's undeniable is that contenders are taking diabolical losses while being bald. And that boy Guram Kudadaladze, prime example of a dude who's just been getting sauced on as a bald man in the UFC. And you would think that he'd be better at fighting just based off of the fact that he's bald. I thought that Gregory Rodriguez was going to come out and slump Jared Cannonier because he's bald. RoboCop is like the chief bald Brazilian tough guy in the UFC now that Glover Teixeira is gone. And so for that reason, I thought that he would just be brawny and angrier because of the lack of hair than Jared Cannonier, and he'd be able to win that fight, but he took a nasty loss that night, and it was really sour for me to watch being that I thought that he would win. There's even some contenders like that boy Bogdan Grad who win fights, but they're bald and they have moments where they're really close to being defeated by these random idiots who come and just challenge for rights to stay in the UFC. And even if he wins, he's making these fights super messy and they're getting drawn out to where they make these upcoming prospects who aren't even prospects really look like actual contenders because they're having close fights with him. If he grew hair, maybe he would win more dominantly. I don't know. I'm just posing the question. Being bald, it's like it signifies like a mentality switch. It's like, yeah, I don't care about my hair. I'm crazy. But now we're going to talk about fighters who were bald and still went out bad. Rafael Fiziev, think about it. Every single fight that he, not even that he finished, that he won decisions in, think about what his hair looked like. It was always this man bun. He always had double braids. Earlier on, whenever he would fight guys like Renato Moicano there, he had shorter hair. And whenever he shaves his head to fight Gamrot in 2023, that's whenever he tears his ACL. Think about this. I don't think this is just some odd mistaked coincidence, man. I think that there's actually foul play going on here. The fact that these guys are bald and bad things keep happening to them. Like I said before, Bogdan Grad, he thought that being bald would save him in a fight with Muhammad Naimov, or in the UFC in general. Bogdan Grad made it to the Contender Series twice. The first time, he was knocked out brutally by a prospect only because he won this fight, and he also just beat Vyacheslav Borshev. His name is Tom Nolan, and he chinned Bogdan Grad with a full head of hair. And Bogdan Grad was like, okay, I've learned my lesson. No more hair, no more goatee. Let's do this again. He gets a contract. In his second appearance on the Contender Series, he wins his first fight in his UFC debut against Lucas Alexander, and then he gets sauced on by Muhammad Naimov while he's bald, thinking that he could ego rebirth because he did bald himself. All bald people with a lay and pray grappling style, they're destined for failure in the UFC. They'll either get chinned being boring, or they'll build a reputation out of being boring and nobody will like them. Movsar Evloev, he used to have a buzz cut, and he reinvented himself by growing his hair out, and that helped his public perception. This look on this style of fighter, people don't like it, and I don't like it much either. This dude's out here getting wheel kicked by Muhammad Naimov, man. Any added bonus of intimidation that you get from being bald is completely erased as soon as they slap you across the neck and the back of your head with their heel throwing a wheel kick. That doesn't knock you out, but just rattles you, and they can see it in your face. It doesn't matter how bald you are. They know that they smell blood. Oh, a tragic fatality. Bruno Silva versus Marc-Andre Barriault. This happened in May 2025, man. I think it was UFC 315. They were in Canada. Bruno Silva faced off for the last time against Marc-Andre Barriault, and then he shaved his head the night of and showed up in the octagon bald. He got elbow TKO'd against the cage and almost died and had to be stretchered out. And this was just probably some last-minute impulsive decision that he made to bald himself, and look at what it amounted to. I don't know if there actually is any correlation between how much hair that you have and how safe you're able to keep yourself in the octagon, but it's a mentality change. I feel like the second that you become a slaphead, you stop thinking in terms of preserving yourself. And you go out and you have really ballsy performances. And sometimes it pays off because the dude that you're fighting isn't ready for that type of fight with you, and you can win it. But lately, the quality of the bald man in the UFC is that they are seeking to be so dangerous that they put themselves in danger. And that's exactly what Bruno Silva had done on this night. I really like Bruno Silva too, and it sucks that this happened to him and he got cut from the UFC because people forget, man. This was Alex Pereira's best fight before he got to like titles and stuff. He had a really good fight with Bruno Silva, and I thought that meant that both of them were going to have good careers, but it only meant one of them was going to have a good career, it turns out. So now we're going to talk about examples of bald fighters still getting their power up after the nerf. So just as recently as 2025, 2024, moments where people have gone bald and it's worked out for them. So individual case studies that we have of this, Gene Silva, his notable rise through the rankings as a bald man has been something worth paying attention to because it's produced many brilliant KOs that have been super sleepy and fun to watch back. Jared Gordon just scored a really big upset knockout over Thiago Moises in a fight that I completely did not see him winning. It's just that bald man strength. It rears its head whenever it wants to. Gabe Green is probably the best example on the screen. This is a welterweight fighter who not only went down to lightweight, but he also shaved his head too and went bald. He had cornrows whenever he fought Brian Battle at 170. He fought a guy named Mateus Camilo, who's another bald man, but he had more hair than Gabe Green. And that was the reason why, in the bald versus bald matchup, he was the one who was not victorious. Gabe Green still went down and took this fight from 170, coming off of a bad knockout loss. Wins this fight, now he's a lightweight contender. Bald Gabe Green. He unlocked a mythical fighter that night. A very significant match. This is just recently. I forgot about the fact that this happened because I only really remember whenever Rob Font loses. And I don't want that to be interpreted as me hating on him. It's just whenever it does go down like that, it's usually more memorable than whenever he wins. But he did beat the crap out of John Matsumoto. This was in February 2025. We'd seen before fights that he had had with guys like Chito Vera, who beat him to near death, and also Jose Aldo, who got the better of him in their fight. And then we just watched him get technically controlled by a fighter like Corey Sandhagen across 5 rounds in their fight. Rob Font had just gotten beat up by Corey Sandhagen and then Davison Figueiredo right afterwards. And like, he had beaten Kyler Phillips before this fight with John Matsumoto, but he really needed this win. So it was good that he got it. And I wonder if he could attribute it to being bald. Maybe it just assisted with the weight cut because it was a harder one this time or something. For whatever reason, he went bald. It ended up working out for him. So hopefully Slaphead Font can return because that was actually a good variant. The next fight we saw a fighter who normally doesn't go bald and win a fight was going to be Jiri versus Jamahal Hill at the very beginning of this year in January. After the way that he had lost to Alex Pereira, it made us think that Jiri may have more competitive striking fights, or that he'd even lose to a fighter like Jamahal Hill, who at the time hadn't been put on Front Street as a dude who's not competitive with dudes who are like Jiri. We needed to see them fight in order for it to happen. And that boy Jiri really needed to KO Jamahal Hill, like, badly in order to still be relevant in the title picture. Even with the new champion, people are still talking about Jiri Prochazka getting right to a title shot because of the work that he's done just as early as this year, and doing the same thing that Khalil Roundtree had just done to Jamahal Hill. Jiri Prochazka did it much better, and the reason why he lost all of his hair going into this fight is because he was showing solidarity for a fan. Her name was Ashley McGarity, and that's her in the bottom left corner, and she was going through chemo and had to lose her hair, but before she did shave all of it off, she made the BPJ head antenna, and she taped it up and she posted a photo of it. Jiri saw it and spent some time with this fan, and I think he shaved her head and then shaved his own as well. And then he took this into the fight and he knocked out Jamahal Hill, and it was really violent. This was a legendary moment. Carlos Prates also had a fan named Randy that he had put on before he fought with Ian Gary. They made him an honorary member of the Fighting Nerds. I don't think he made it, unfortunately. So these are special moments that fighters get to share with these fans. Like, this is what the game is about, dude. We talk about petitions and memes and stuff, dude. This is what it's about right here. And I'm grateful that Jiri was able to get a win for her, because I never followed up. I don't know how she's doing at the current moment. So that's going to take us on to the best fight where a combatant who normally fights with hair went bald and won. This is the entire basis of me making this video. I just didn't want it to be around the Eagle Rebirth as the theme or the running joke that navigated the talk through this whole thing, because it's not my joke. But yeah, this is the Eagle Rebirth, dude. That boy Brian Ortega had just gotten his block knocked off by Max Holloway, and he was getting taught how to block punches and throw hooks in the pocket, and then disappeared for a little bit, and then came back bald and fought Chang Sung Jung. I was new to the sport. This fight happened in 2020, so this would have been the first time that I would have seen either of these guys fight live. I knew Chang Sung Jung as a boxer, and I knew Brian Ortega as a jiu-jitsu guy, so I was not expecting Brian Ortega to come out with boxing that looked the way that it did this night. He didn't care about anything. It looked like he was willing to die in there, and the biggest moment of this fight was Brian Ortega taking the reins with the boxing and putting a pace on the Korean Zombie to the point where he felt like he had to get it back by initiating blitzes back into Brian Ortega at the end of his combos. Brian Ortega got a read on this, and so he started coasting off of the back foot. He dropped a combo on TKZ, faded, and then spun into an elbow that flash KO'd the Korean Zombie. And that's a really hard thing to do because he has a good chin. And from that point on in the fight, the Korean Zombie was autopiloting so hard, and you could tell it. And that was the first time that I'd ever seen someone get hit really hard and almost knocked out, but it didn't knock them out. And I got to see the effects of what that looked like for a fighter to just be in survival mode, and their legs aren't under them, and they're not focused on output. They're just focused on getting to the end. And this was a really crazy performance. I've never seen this version of Brian Ortega back in the cage ever since he left. Even in fights that he won recently, like against Yair Rodriguez, it wasn't like this. I don't know. He wasn't getting caught, dude. Because like Diego Lopez, he even knocked out Brian Ortega and woke him back up. Imagine if Brian Ortega, it was this version who came out and won. I feel like people don't talk about this performance enough. This was a beautiful performance. It was perfect. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't get caught. There was no testing of his chin after he got in one of the most bloody wars I'd ever seen. Look at the top left corner. The doctor had to stop this fight. And he comes back, and this is a tough opponent. This is 2020 Korean Zombie, and he picks him apart, whoops his ass. And he does it while he's bald. So you guys have to tell me, what do you think? What do you guys think, man? Do you think that being bald has been nerfed? Do you think that it's still a viable base for MMA? Do you get nervous for seeing bald fighters? Like, if your favorite fighter comes out to his next fight bald, are you just going to assume that he's going to get skunked, or what's the word, man? I want to know. I'm going to have the UFC 317 fight predictions coming out very soon. Happy International Fight Week to all of you guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I will be back for more content very soon, fellas. Have a good one.